Ladies and gentlemen, to respond to the toast, without doubt one of the most captivating speakers I have ever heard, without doubt one of the greatest football names I've ever been associated with. Would you please welcome Mr. David Parkin.
That is a huge wrap. Thanks very much, Craig. I know you don't mean it. Better than the gentleman I met at the airport on the way to Sunshine Coast yesterday, who raced up to me as I was about to get on the plane and said, "Excuse me, Kevin, but can you tell me why you would have taken on the job of coaching Western Sydney?" So at least I'm at home company here and somebody might actually recognise me. Thanks for the welcome, and it's it's not very funny when you think about it. Surely I'm better looking than Kevin, but anyway. I'm delighted to be here, and the fact that the Spirit of Carlton group has seen fit to make this the focus of our recognition for the 81 side at this luncheon, and the number of people who have decided to join us today, those who watched, and I watched, I suppose, most of the time and kept my fingers crossed. For those who played, and this group has been very strong because the guys who were there but didn't actually represent the team on the day have in fact turned up in numbers, and that shows the strength of the bond between this particular group. And I'm delighted, yes, that continues. I thank Mike, and people ask about captains that you've been privileged to coach, and Michael had this wonderful capacity, like great captains should, but he had the capacity. If we were playing Sydney on the bottom, you could forget about Mike, he wouldn't be worth a pinch of cockies. But if it was the MCG on grand final day and the act or actions had to be produced, Michael produced them every time, and it made him a great leader of this club, and he's gone on to do wonderful things since, which I'm also very proud of. He didn't have much time for me. If you'd read the Mike Fitzpatrick diary, which I happened to digest, I think about a week before the grand final, he said, "Would you like to read this before we actually print it?" I didn't go to sleep that night, Michael. I read every single word, and to call me a nasty military prick I thought was very demeaning, but we got to understand each other after a while. I am really delighted that Malcolm and Tammy have seen fit to accept the invitation and be here today, because we talk about the 1981 and 82. They don't talk ever about the Premiership and how it's won. They talk about the visit that you organised for us for the Lodge in those 2 years. And I'd have to say it remains, and we've all got the film, it remains an absolute highlight of our lives in a year that we had a lot to celebrate, but that was one of the great celebrations. So I'm delighted that you're both here today and a part of this day. Mark McClure rang me, he said, "Parker, make sure it's funny, not serious." And I got off the phone, I said to them, "Funny and not serious, that's not me." And then Bob Lowry rang me and said, "Make it serious and not funny." So I'm going to try and do my best. I reminded the weekend I happened to go to the Hawthorn 1971, what's that, 40-year anniversary at the weekend, and who turned up but Joe Heath. Kevin Heath was there as a part of that group. Kevin Heath, no one will know here, but Kevin Heath was removed from the Hawthorn Football Club by me. I said, "This bloke will not work, won't train, get rid of him or else I'm going." And John Kennedy, I think, made the toughest decision of his life to unload Kevin to Carlton, where I arrived the next year. Those who in the audience will remember this, because it's that I've been in one place for about 15 or 20 years, I'm rejected there, and I end up becoming coach of the Carlton Football Club. My first meeting on that, whatever it was, afternoon, where the players were all sitting in that room, the elevated room, about to make my first statement to the playing group that I'd become responsible for, who stood up at the back and walked down between the players with his hands stuck out, I haven't even opened my mouth, was Kevin Heath, saying, "I've changed, I've changed." and all his teammates are going, suck, 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 you know. It wasn't a great moment to actually start my life, but more interesting was probably, I think, a day or two later, I met the committee in those days, and I didn't know the board, as we now would call them, at all, individually or collectively. I walked in, we're standing around a very nice group passing the time of day, and a fellow called Bruce Comben walked in. Those who remember Bruce, he was a tough little back, yes, Bruce Comben, very tough little back pocket player, and I remember that. He pulled out the biggest pair of scissors that I've ever seen and walked round, I'm standing here, he walked round to each member, it was about a 14, maybe even a 16 committee in those days, and he just walked up to each one, took the tie and cut it off just below the knot. And he walked round the whole room, cutting off the committee's ties. And I'm looking very strange that not one person resented it or attempted to stop him, but he went right round. You're laughing, Colin. You were there. It was probably, and he came right round to me, and I thought, well, I'm going to lose a very decent tie. But he did me the courtesy of not cutting my tie off, but said to me, now where in Melbourne can you go and get a better set of ties than that? And I thought, I think this bloke actually holds a bit of power in this place because not one of them actually resented it. But that was a strange introduction, Colo, to who the committee was. Obviously, Bruce Comben had a fair bit of quilt to go. So that was my start. Strange place, a bit scary. He was a scary man. Look, just to put it in perspective, and Tim really has, between 1978 and 1982, they never finished lower than fourth, and they won 3 premierships. Says something about the quality of the talent that was there. They're rarely mentioned, in my humble opinion, in relation to the teams of the 50s, which Melbourne produced, the teams of the 80s, which I guess the Hawks produced, the teams of the 90s, which Brisbane produced. This team's never mentioned in the same mouthful. But I think publicly we should acknowledge that it is one of the greatest teams of one of the greatest years, and 1981 happened to be the middle of that. Many of the best individual players who could hold their name or performance up in any era. When you talk about Fitzy and Buzz and Bomber and Jono and Roy and Dooley and Shark and Ashy and Spider and Bucks, it's an interesting group of names, aren't they? Sefter and Glazer and Macca and Marcel and Sellers and Pig and Swanee and Dares and Colonel. I mean, they were a superb group of players in any era. And I'm very proud to be a part of that in the sense of being responsible for their performance. I'm delighted too. I worked with Tony Shurham, got to know him very well. I know Peter over a long period of time, and Renee too. To think, I must admit, if it had been reversed and I had to come in to do an Eston thing in 1993, I wouldn't be turning up. There's no way known that I could turn up on the back of that. So I am very thankful that those 3 of our opponents have bothered to come out and join us today. I think that's fantastic. We played the Pies 3 times. I think Tim mentioned we played it 3 times. We beat them by 20 points in the grand final, but we had losses by 57 and 1 point along the way. We didn't start favourites on the day. And these finals were a tough final series. Just to go back one step further, Collingwood defeated Fitzroy by 1 point in the first semi-final. In the second semi-final, we got over Geelong by 40 points, the biggest margin of that final series. Collingwood then defeated Geelong by just 7 points. Carlton went on to defeat Collingwood in the finish by 20 points. 2 things that I might add. Apology to Mario Bortolotto. Mario came from Geelong to be a part of that, and I don't know whether Mario's here today or he probably is somewhere. Mario sat on the bench for the whole of the 1981 game, and I didn't even give him the opportunity to step on the ground, Mario. So this is a humble apology 30 years later for not even giving me the chance to grace the ground. But what I remember most, and I'll finish on this, what I remember most was the pre-match. We're in the Melbourne rooms, the old Melbourne rooms. I went in because in those days you were supposed to get the jugular going and spit over a few of the players, and it was the rousing, emotional plea by the coach that got people underway. That was expected in those days. They're a bit smarter these days. I walked into the box, 7 minutes to go, to find 5 players only waiting for the coach's address. You might say we're only playing Collingwood, but we're not going to win with 5, so I got a bit panicky. I went to look for the others. Went first to the medical room to find 7 of my players lined up with the doctor in a line waiting to get local anaesthetic into some part of their body. All of whom had looked at me on the Thursday night and said, I'm fit, hit me. It was the other shoulder. Hit me here, I'm right. All told me blatant lies to my face that they were 100% okay and yet couldn't go out without having a local anaesthetic. I thought, my God, 7 and 5 are 12. Where are the other 8? So I staggered round the Melbourne rooms, opening all those little anti-doors and looking in until I finally opened a room, and when my eyes became accustomed to light, here were 9 people on the floor. The psychologist and 8 of my players all holding hands, trying to get up enough courage or whatever it was to play the game. So I worked. I'm not a good mathematician. That's 7 physically and 8 mentally. That's 15. That's 75% of the team that went out to play Collingwood that day were not in the right shape physically or emotionally to win. I'm not sure, Tony, what it says about the Collingwood Blokes, but we in fact won, so you're probably worse on the other side of the door. Look, we were part of an amazing piece of history, and the bond, as I suggested, between these guys has remained as strong as any group I've ever seen. They did things, and it's not until I started to try and read their biographies that I realised there was a lot more going on than I actually knew about. But they are a superb bunch of people, and if you look at their lives since, and that's what I get most proud about, people who've gone on and done great things with their life after football. And I think the Carlton Football Club should take some kudos for what they've done in developing these young men, not only as footballers to do what they did do, but to leave the football environment and then go on and make a contribution to society in a broader sense. I am very proud of that and proud of that history in doing so. In saying that, I noticed the players, a table of the players today, and we, I think, should throw a bit of a challenge down to them, because this group did create a unique history and they've done a lot since. But I think for those in the room, most of all, who are blue-blooded people, are hoping, and what we saw here last Friday night, I think they would have left the game last Friday night knowing that Hawthorn won't be their nemesis. They have, when they finish the game, the capacity to take them on whoever else. They played some great footy at the finish. So we not so much challenge you, but wish you well as you try and create some of your own unique history for this footy club. It needs you now to stand up and deliver. It's been a long time coming. Thank you for listening to me.